What if the true feminine doesn't begin with the maiden, as is often said, but with a mother? Hello, my beautiful, mythical old souls, and a huge warm welcome back. In this conversation, I'm joined by the wonderful Coco Oya Cienna-Rey. Coco is the author of Digging for Mother's Bones from Womancraft Publishing. Coco is a mother, grandmother, mystic, soul guide, writer, and creative whose work is deeply rooted in her devotion to the Tantric path and the long, courageous journey she's walked. Together, Coco and I explore the profound journey from trauma to remembrance, from collapse to creative power. We trace the raw mythic arc of a woman silenced by pain who is reborn through the arms of the Great Mother. This conversation moves like an initiation, stirring deep memory in the body and revealing the erotic, mystical core of the feminine. Coco shares the story behind the birth of her book, a journey that begins with abuse and mental illness and unfolds through a spontaneous Kundalini awakening, a near death experience, and a long path of integration. This is a conversation that speaks to the place in each of us that longs to feel, to open, to receive, to remember that we are not only enough, we are the very axis of life itself. And before we jump into all of that good stuff, if you're struggling with the challenges of walking your soul path in this crazy modern world and would benefit from guidance, kinship, and support, come join our Academy of the Soul Unio. You can find out more and join us by hopping on over to bemythical.com/unio now or click the link in the description. And now back to this week's episode. Let's dive in. Hello, Coco. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Lian. It's a privilege. It feels really good to be here.
Oh, it really does. And I really hope listeners are getting to take in your gloriousness on video because you look absolutely radiant. And I'm very aware that whilst this is a conversation that in theory we could be having any time, it feels something very important and symbolic to mention. Like today is the day of your birth of your book, and I feel like I want to mention that just at the outset, just to really welcome in that energy of celebration and that being birthed into the world. So I just wanted to mention that before we even go anywhere else, because it feels so important to do so.
Thank you so much. It really feels kind of surreal that this is like my life going through this portal of birthing the book. We'll talk more about why that is as we go on. But yeah, it's a really key, important like threshold.
I can so feel that. So, my dear, where did all of this come from? What brought you to writing this book?
What brought me to writing the book was a lot of questions. I had a lot of questions. I grew up in a very turbulent household. There was a lot of chronic abuse, sexually, physically, mentally, emotionally. And as a child, I never felt like I fit in, and I couldn't understand why there was so much trauma and abuse. I couldn't understand how we accepted that as normal behavior when I knew that we'd come from the stars and a place to come to a place of love. And so I was always like the black sheep of the family, the one that was always seen as causing chaos because I'd call it out all the time. And over a period of time, I began to lose my voice. I became mute because of the trauma and abuse and being like gaslit so much. And so I kind of stuffed it all away because everyone wants that sense of belonging, right? We want to belong to our families and things. So I kind of put it all away and just began to act like, that was the norm and accepted it as the norm. And it wasn't until I met the kid's father and told him, and I met him when I was very young, I met him when I was 13, that he was kind of saying that's not normal, that it's not normal to live like that. And so by the time I got to 15, I thought, I'm out of here. I cannot tolerate that anymore. But I didn't realise that just walking away wouldn't solve the thing. So for many, many years, I was classified as like bipolar, having severe mental illness, anxiety. I had agoraphobia for a long while, because I just became so detached from my sense of self and sense of being. And then some years later, I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. I wasn't spiritual in any way. I had no idea what was happening. It was a casual, like Sunday afternoon in the garden with family and friends. And then suddenly I just kept hearing this booming noise. And I had no idea, and no one else could hear it. And when I traced what it was a drop of water dropping on the floor from a drain, and it just like exploded me out into the stratosphere. Um, yeah, it was a lot.
I've got chills. I've heard so many stories of kind of incredible, mystical openings and near-death experiences. You know, I've kind of had something of that myself. But what you've just described, that just complete out of the blue,
Mhm.
um, that's something
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
Wow. Mm.
Now, when I look at it, I was in so much bliss and joy that day. It was like I was so present that it was just like all timelines collided into one.
Mm.
Because I had no idea of what this was. What happened was all my clairs came on, and I could hear people's thoughts, hear people from miles away, sense things. And I thought I'd lost my mind. And so did
Mm.
my family, because I was gibbering then as well, talking. Now I know the divine feminine language, and nobody understood what was happening. So I kind of got sectioned at that time. And then, but something in my awareness was like, I need to, again, push this aside and act normal. And so if you can imagine that accumulation of all that trauma, all that abuse, it just practically overwhelmed me for like 10 years after that. And then um, I had what I call another awakening, where through not wanting to be here because I couldn't understand what was happening, I was so detached from my body, just living in my head. And so I always say that my soul was like whispering to me, and it was like a cosmic journey of, we're going to have to turn her off because she just is not getting it. And that day when I wanted to die, it wasn't like a conscious thing. I just knew that that's what was going to happen. And I can remember laying on the bed and feeling my soul leave my body. And the part of the story that I love now is that my best friend who lived in Canada, I'm in the UK, felt that happening and set in motion my rescue.
Oh my gosh.
And so again, it was a confirmation of there is no time and space, and it wasn't my time to go. And so when I crossed over and met the mother, and this always makes me want to cry every time I tell this story, because I have never felt love like that in my life. I felt so unloved throughout my life that to feel the presence of pure love, no judgment, was like the healing balm that I needed. And when the cosmic mother was like talking to me around, it's not my time to go, I've got things to do, but there is no judgment if I want to go. My soul will journey into somebody else and the story will continue. And so when I came back, it was like, no, I want to come back and I want to understand. But when I came back, I'd lost a lot of my memories and stories. It was like I'd been rebooted and wiped clean. And so it was a journey to remember who I was. So that's when I started journaling to really get answers. And that's how the book began to be birthed. I didn't know it was going to be a book. I was just writing the journal to understand myself, to try and remember times of what had happened in my life and make sense of what had happened in my life. And then um, through that rehabilitation, the messages started getting more prophetic, and the force in me to write, I'd get up, in the middle of the night and be scribing and scribing, and then my daughter could come back from school and say, "Mum, you've not moved." You're like, "You're still there." And even then, I didn't know that it was going to be a book, but I called out to the mother and just said that if I'm meant to be here, then send me help now, because I'm not doing this on my own. And yeah, someone came in the form of a teacher who helps me understand the suicidal ideation, was around ego death. And that the reason I kept collapsing on myself, like with depression, was because my system was so big that it was like it just collapsed on it, kept collapsing on itself, because I didn't know how to hold the capacity of that amount of energy and power in my
Mm.
body. So it was a long process of like 4 years learning to really get back in my body, understand the technology of the female form, particularly the womb, particularly the pussy power. And that is the seat of the power in me. And understanding then that this force of nature that's in me, this sensual, deep sexual, sensual thing, which used to terrify me as a child
Mm.
because it brought unwanted attention, was my medicine and is the fuel that I needed to really embrace and embody, and um, understanding that I had a big job to do. Is one of the most distorted energies on the planet. It's been, overlaid with lots of different patterns and beliefs around it being sinful, around lust, distortion, all the way through to rape. There's lots of just distortions around our sexual energy, and it's the most purest energy that there is. And so my job was to remember that as a erotic, innocent impulse, that pure sense of pure love and light that lives in the body, that is pure bliss. And so yeah, I've kind of feel like writing about my history in such a way in the book, and feeding it in with the messages from the mother around how we can turn that around and how we can be in the body in a loving way, where we understand that we are master creators, and that creative energy that creates life is the thing that fuels us. um yeah, it's been a journey, and I'm really excited that it's here now. It feels surreal that it's
Mm.
here now, and I also need a really good rest.
Yes, bless you. Just like when a mother's given birth, like we need some time to just be there and be fed and looked after. Yes, oh my gosh. Well, firstly, congratulations again. Oh my gosh, now knowing more about your story, I can feel even more how important this is today.
Mm,
My goodness, thank you so much for sharing that. There's part of me, I feel like I want to know more about aspects of your story actually before we kind of go into the topic, just because there was just so many parts of this that were
mhm,
like, oh my goodness, wow. And another part that was just like
mm.
again, I hear so many magical, incredible stories, but there's so much of yours that just has been really kind of almost left me speechless at points. So one of the points that really stood out was when you were saying about your best friend in Canada, I think you said,
Mm,
um, knowing that that was
mm.
happening for you. Would you
Yeah.
mind just sharing a little bit more about, you sort of said it was like you sort of lay down and just knew that that was what was going to happen. Had you done something, as in like in a practical, literal sense? Had you done something to,
Mm,
was that your intention that day? What do you think went on for your friend
mhm.
that she realized that? Just, I would love to. It feels like there's so much in that day that I would love to know a bit more about.
So leading up to that day, I don't think I'd spoken to my family, my children or my family or my friends for about a week. I'd like done tiny little messages, and I can remember like 4 days before that my daughter was checking, "Are you all right?" Me saying, "Yeah, I'm just in my cave," kind of thing. But I knew something was happening. I'd never gone that inside myself so much, and it was a sense of I am so alone. I am so unloved, even though everybody loved me. Do you know what? I couldn't feel it.
Mm.
And I'd gone through, some really pretty bad breakups just before that, not just in a relationship, but with like friends who kind of turned on me. It was like the sisterhood. And I just got to a point where I just thought, I'm tired of being here. How can my life be so painful? How could it have been so traumatic? I am done. And I can remember like crying out to God saying, "You promised me that when I came here, I was coming to a land of like milk and honey." And and like going, "This is hell." And I'm out. I am out of here. I'm gone. And I can just remember like being in this surreal kind of state of like, I crossed over into a place where I was just sudden when I declared that, like, I was really calm. And I started packing away my belongings, like, so that if the kids found me, I know this sounds really like neurotic, that they knew where everything was. And then I can just remember lying on the bed. But then what happened was the phone never stopped ringing. My, the kids were trying to ring me. My friend tried to ring me. The kid's dad tried to ring me, and we'd been separated for like 10 years. I was just like, "What? Can you just leave me to die?" And I can remember ignoring the call and just lying there and like going, "No, I'm not answering anybody." And the funny thing is, I knew they could feel me because when I get close to people and like my kid, it's like we've had the same dreams together before and we've like experienced certain things and we've gone, "Oh, are you experiencing that today?" So I knew they could feel that something was going on, but I wasn't having any of it. And um, to that day, I cannot remember if I took anything or if I just lied there and willed myself to death because as I felt myself like being drained of light, it was the most peaceful thing I've ever felt in my life. But as I said, as it started, could feel myself coming out of myself, my friend, my dear, dear friend, obviously felt she just found my kids on the social media because she didn't have their number and just said, "There is something wrong with your mum. I can feel it." And then instead of trying to ring me, my kids rang the police. And
Oh, wow. Bless your friend and bless your children for just like, I mean, isn't that an example of trusting that feminine wisdom in
mhm,
itself?
yeah, and
Yeah.
so that's the thing, but not just feminine wisdom, the capacity of what we are as
Mm.
humans. We are telepathic
Mm.
and we communicate through senses and through emotion. And to me, it was like that heightened state of remembrance for me after, as much as I was annoyed, I was also like, there was a part of me that was grateful, like, "Oh, there is no time and space." Do you know what
Oh.
I mean? We are so connected. And it brought back that seed of like love because in that moment when I can remember like being on the bed and then hearing the door being crashed in and the police standing in my room and like leaning over me. And I like looked up and was like, just, I couldn't speak. And they kept, asking, "Did I take something?" And I could not speak. And then I remember the paramedics being there and then the whole of the family being there and just being so overwhelmed and then just being like lifted up to the hospital. And I can remember getting to the hospital and then wanting to section. And it was like my whole senses came back on and I just said, "No, I need to go home." And I can't remember meeting the mother in that specific point, but I remember being encased in the womb of her. And so the night
Mm.
when they let me go home, I remember laying again on the bed again and just thinking, oh my God, what is going on? And then feeling that same energy just descend in me and feeling
Mm.
the mother had me held in her arms, and I went back to being a tiny child, to being a newborn. It was like, again, she just wiped me clean. And in that moment, I just knew that I was love. I am loved, and I'm here for a bigger purpose. And so that's how the journey with really tuning into the mother. But again, I would say that there was a part of me that wasn't best pleased, because it was like, right, if I'm back here now, then we need to get to it, because I am not doing this anymore. I need to understand exactly what's at play here. Why am I feeling all this stuff? Why do I feel like I feel the whole universe? What is going on with my life? And that's when the journaling started, and the messages, understanding of the potency of the rising of the feminine, and understanding that I had gone through so much trauma and pain so that I could understand the full human experience, from joy to pain. And
Mm.
really understanding that as a priestess, that I came back to help rewrite the sexual wounds of the planet, because it is our innate life force that has been corrupted in so many ways. Um, and like I said, in that moment, I was like declaring, then I need help to understand how it works, how I work, how it works. And that's when, someone came in the form of a teacher and helped me to really understand ego death in a big way, clearing ancestral wounding in a big way, understanding the technology of the female form, my womb and my pussy, and just the capacity of that to create life, but not just a baby, life, the fabric of life. It's
Mm. Everything, absolutely everything.
everything.
So as we were talking before we hit record, um, I was asking you kind of what is it that you see is, I guess, sort of particular to your work and your book and your message. Having given you that context, there's been many conversations on this show about all things the feminine. And as soon as you started talking and you mentioned the mother, I was
Mhm.
like, already I'm kind of like, yes, 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 almost like whatever you say after this, I'm in. And it sounds a funny thing in a way, because it's like, well, isn't that like something that's been talked about a lot? It has. And yet, um, as I was sharing with you, I find it fascinating that for all of the things that are said and written about and spoken about to do with the feminine, the divine feminine, um, it's funny how the mother actually is probably the least spoken about.
Mhm.
And even to the point where, and I'm not saying like this is absolutely essential, but it's an interesting thing that I've noticed, the how few female teachers of the feminine are mothers. And so that's something that I've noticed quite a lot over the time in the kind of circles that I'm in, and knowing lots of other teachers of this work, is actually the mothers are tending to be like the minority, which is an interesting thing. Like, why would that be? So it's something that, again, I feel as though there is something so timely and important about talking about this aspect of the feminine, but not just it's an aspect of the feminine. In some ways, it is like the heart of the feminine. It's like where she starts and ends. And weirdly, again, how we can talk about so many things sort of downstream from her, and while somehow not quite getting to the point of really honoring her. And
Mhm.
so, again, as soon as you said that, I'm like, yeah, I'm in. Okay. And I had an experience not like yours, but my own experience of the Great Mother, a good few years ago now, and it was interesting hearing your description because although mine came in a very different form, I could use such similar words to
Mm,
describe that just being like held in love, like just like
mhm,
saturated,
yeah,
encompassed in
mhm,
pure love.
yeah,
And it was, I've had lots of other experiences, but it's the experience that's been most like the way that you described that, and which in itself was like, that's so interesting. It's such, the same experience I had.
mhm, mhm,
Um, so I guess what one thing I want to ask your sense of is that something that everyone could have the experience of? Is it
mhm.
something that's kind of there from your perspective, kind of there and like present all the time? And we innocently close ourselves off from the knowing of?
100%. I do believe there are women, I call them sirens of the mother, that emanate this frequency of her and have gone through their own initiations to envelop that. But like you said, every single one that I've spoken to has had that same feeling, that same experience of being enveloped by her in the energetics of her womb and like rebirthed again in her essence, in her frequency. And so I know I didn't fully understand it at the time, but as I started talking to other people, they would get activated by me just being in that essence. And they would feel the love of her. And I do believe that the more we talk about this and the more we embody this, it's like tuning forks. We are the
Mm,
sound of creation and we are attuning each other to vibrate at this level of pure love. And so it's a ripple effect. And I know that, my book's been out a little while, as in people who have got pre-orders over the last few days. Every single one of them said, I don't know what I'm reading, but I am activated. I am crying. My womb is being, activated. And so I know the potency of just one drop of her love can
mm,
do miraculous things. And like you said, it is the center of the feminine. It's like we cannot evolve without going back to the mother.
mm,
And unfortunately, as it's been filtered out, it's been written out of history. We became accustomed to having a sky daddy,
mm.
rather than knowing that creation comes through female form. We've had like severe cognitive dissonance that we think that woman was birthed out of a man's rib. Sorry for any religious people but it's just cognitive dissonance to me.
Completely. You're preaching to the converted, and beautifully, I think it was not last week, but the week before's episode, at least when we're recording this, it was all about this exact topic. It was about that kind of forgotten face of God, basically,
Yeah,
the feminine aspect that is essential. We wouldn't be here
yeah,
without her.
exactly.
So yes, I couldn't agree
Yeah.
more.
So as that's gone down
Mm.
through filtered into physical reality, we have desecrated the mother. We have like disowned and disembodied from the mother to the point where birth now is just seen as nothing. When it's the most sacred act, we are bringing life into form. There's not one of us that has not incubated in the woman, and we've forgotten in a big way where we've come from
Mm,
to the point where, yeah, women are seen as second class citizens when we should be revered. And so, this potency of the feminine now, the mother, it's like she said, enough now, children. I am
mm,
bringing order because you've gone too far. You've got free will, but you've gone too far. The distortions are too much. And it's like we are coming back now into full alignment and harmony, which is centering the mother at the center of creation, because
mm.
that's where we all came from. So it is a big part. And, it's a journey to get there. A lot of the things that are in the feminine field right now are about self, as in understanding self and the body and our sensual nature and everything, but we need to start going underneath that and embracing it as the impulse of life. We came here, I believe, as women to turn the trajectory of the planet around, because it is living through us as a living technology. And last month, I got a strong directive to do a call around disconnecting from the moon, because women, not that we can't align with the moon, but for me, we have outsourced our power. We are too influenced by that body. Our bodies are not meant to operate in that way. We are, even though we are cyclical beings, we are not, we are meant to be able to control what is happening in our bodies, not an outside body controlling what happens to our bodies. And so, yeah, I led a call in connecting to the original energetics of the earth and disconnecting from the moon, and so that we can be fully structural as the feminine and also the masculine, and really embrace that energy and know that it is coming through us to plant it here on the planet so that we can change the fabric of the planet. We all know as women, when we come together, our wombs sync up. It's not just a coincidence. It's not just isn't that fascinating? No, there's a reason. There's a
Mm.
reason, so that we can be tuning forth and bring this through in a deeper, bigger way, which is why I talk about, the wisdom of the womb and the technology of our pussy power to fuel that as women, because we've got to stop being afraid of the potency of that energy, because it is the very thing that created the spark of creation, and it's the very thing that will bring it back into alignment.
Something that I wanted to make sure that we spent some time on. Before we started recording, you were talking about the sort of virgin and whore, kind of almost like paradox that is within her.
Mm-hmm.
And synchronistically, I'm running a course for women at the moment called Beauty Potion. And I can't remember if it was this week or last week, we were talking about exactly this. And it feels like this, it's such a paradox in general isn't easy for humans to kind of like we try to solve these riddles with our minds, and they're not for our minds to solve. And this one being, one of those ones that really it requires a lot of ourselves to be able to hold that seeming dichotomy of the virgin and the whore. And that virgin mother, where of course how can she be a virgin if she's a mother, and yet she is both. And so I would love to hear more about your sense of that, because I think it is critical in us understanding her true depth and power, where we're not kind of like cutting off parts of her to make her more palatable and more easy to understand.
Mm-hmm. So, in my eyes, there's a lot of history behind why the separation happened. Mainly a lot around fear of that power, fear of that potency, and dare I say, the masculine essence being in fear of the feminine, because it can be a wild, chaotic energy. It is free, like a freedom of energy. And so trying to control that, it was like splitting off aspects of the mother. Like you said, we invented the virgin mother, and then we invented the whore, and like separated them without realizing and remembering that all mothers are created through a sexual act. Do you know what I mean? It's like it we are penetrated by a life force, and we seed life. And so we cannot move forward with that split anymore, because it causes great distortion. And so the virgin and whore split is essential to heal and integrate within ourselves as women, that we are both that divine, like spark of life, but also the very essence of sexual potency on the planet. But because of the way that it got distorted, we've become so afraid of that, and men have almost like become seekers of that. energy to the point it's almost become predatory. But it's because of the distortion. And I always think when women learn to fully be in that without being afraid of that, it will rewrite what is happening in the field around the imbalance between the masculine and feminine. Because my deep belief is that men don't want to harm women, but they want the essence of the mother.
Mm.
Because when they do, then they can live from heart centered being. But right now, again, for men, it's like they've been cut off at the waist and they live from the lower chakras of the body. And it becomes, when it's too much of that, it becomes lust rather than love. And so for men, my directives were to awaken the hearts and minds of men so that all that energy could come and live from the heart and rewrite the stories in the brain, and to awaken women to the wonders of themselves so that they knew the operating system of their body, and that the places that have been most vilified, their sexual genitalia and their womb and their breast, everything that makes them woman, to understand that they aren't just passive things in the body, they are
Mm.
the very thing that can, um, yeah, change the atmosphere in a room when we're fully embodied in that full presence. And that is what we are here to do. We are changing the field through the tone that comes through our bodies. And that means shame has to go, guilt has to go, you know, the way that we look at our bodies in a derogatory way has to go. All the things where we've been conditioned to think it's the way that we look um, makes us a woman. No, it's the way that we set the tone of the room that makes us woman, and that's through our
Mm.
bodies and our being.
So I'm curious, going back again to you in your own life, because again, such a fascinating story. And it, there is, to come from the background you have, and then it's not like it just ended at childhood. You then had,
Mm,
decades, it sounds,
yeah,
of really challenging experiences to be with.
yeah.
Um, when you describe, to the point where you were sectioned and you had all of these mental health conditions, what I'd love to know is, of course, the experience you had with the mother and then kind of what you've been told since have all had an impact. But what does that look like tangibly in terms of like who you are now, how you live now? If we were to compare you now and how you feel, how you be in the world compared to before that happened,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say, like how would you name that change?
Okay, so I class myself as a mystic. I was never meant to live in my head, but I was meant to be connected to, the bigger, wider, ethereal nature of life to bring
I'm
in.
so glad you know that about yourself, because funny enough, right early in the conversation, I was going to say something like, you're so clearly a mystic. And I don't know why I didn't say it, but I was kind of like, I'm glad you do know that about yourself, because of course.
It took me a while to embrace that because obviously, as a person growing up and having no one around me to like talk of these things, I thought I was mad hearing things, you know what I mean?
Mm,
Or I thought that why don't I see everything, like everyone else does? And why do I have to feel everything? And why do I have to see things so big? And like people would say, God, you're so serious, or, it's not that serious. And it's like, no, to me, I was reading the full field. I could tell when things were going to come in months before they came in. And I didn't understand that. I could tell when people were going to pass it over. I could tell lots of things. But it sounded like she's just away with the fairies. Do you know what I
mm,
mean? And because I was so hypersensitive, I felt, you know, everything. I felt nature growing. I felt nature beneath me. I felt the stars like as part of me. And so now, when I first had the first awakening, the Kundalini awakening, oh my God, that was just so intense because I thought I felt things before, but I felt so much, and I had to learn that my sensitivity was my greatest gift. but we live in a world where we're not supposed to feel to that depth.
Mm.
We're not supposed to have such emotional full range. You know, we're meant to live in a very narrow bandwidth. And it was like my whole giant sense of being just exploded out of me, and I had to learn how to navigate it. It was like living as a Fiat and then realizing you're a Bentley. Do you know?
Yeah.
It's like I had to learn how to drive a very fast car very quickly.
Mm.
And so, yeah, a very powerful vehicle of my body, and understand that all these layers that live in the body, like the mental, emotional, physical, and then spiritual, there were layers beyond that, the ethereal, and then, you know, many dimensions, and then source. And because I had that experience where I was catapulted to source, it was like learning to bring stability of that into the body. So it's like my soul could live as me in my
Mm.
body, and but also incorporate the human side of me, the part that I wanted to dismiss, the part that I wanted to let go of, and really understand the shadow aspect of life, and see it as, now I see that as, those experiences were the fuel for my medicine. They were the thing that I alchemized and turned into like compost for growth. And what kind of happens is that we kind of want to either heal it, dismiss it, push it away, instead of embracing it and holding it like we would a mother to a loving child that has been traumatized. We wouldn't push it away. And so I had to learn to love those aspects of myself and really give them grace and compassion for the experiences that they'd had, and the harm as well that I'd caused to other people, because I was so traumatized myself. And through that, I could really understand the story of my mum and dad, who severely, you know, traumatized us as children, and had compassion for them. So it's been a long journey of really understanding that we were birthed into a paradigm that was distorted. Every single one of us has had trauma. Every one of us carries the mother wound because
Mm.
it was wiped out of history. So it's like, again, I had to understand the full kind of range of what it is to be mother as martyr, the sacrificial lamb, and then mother as divine like being. And again,
Mm.
alchemize that all into being. And I always laugh and feel like mother and my soul were going, like, what are we going to do with this girl? Because she keeps going,
We need to pull off something
yeah,
big,
we need
an
to do something,
intervention.
yeah, because she keeps going back into the old story. We're going to have to, you know, reboot her. And that's how I felt
Mm.
like this dialogue I was having before with my soul. My soul just said, I can be utilized somewhere else. If you don't want to use me, if you don't want to believe that this is part of you, then I'm out of here.
Yeah, I'll go do my work somewhere else.
And now it's like the best thing that ever happened to me, because it's like understanding we are never alone. This field of the mother, this ether that's all around us, we can rest back into that and be fueled by that. We're not meant to
Mm.
live in the front of the body. We're not meant to be always going in perpetual motion. We're meant to have life come, and we're meant to receive life. We're not meant to push against life. We're meant to receive it
Mm.
in. And as a woman, I didn't know how to surrender and receive, obviously, which is why I mean, and lots of women don't, because
Of
we are
course,
afraid
yeah.
of that deep penetration
Mm.
of life or by another person. It's like, can we fully surrender? And it's funny, I just did a podcast yesterday for another friend, and I was talking about that over the last week, my labia has switched on in a way that I can't understand. And it all stemmed from me sharing a post around the fact that women's anatomy was never designed to be penetrated, was designed to pull in. And I've had
Mm.
the experience where my labia's come alive and has drawn the phallus in. And so when I wrote that, a lot of women were triggered and almost like lashing out. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting that that has triggered so much when it's the ultimate
Mm,
truth. And then so I sat with it and then I realized, oh, it's because of the fear of receptivity that
yes.
we don't want to feel, we don't want to take in all life. We've like numbed ourselves from our sensitivity, and we've numbed ourselves from understanding that we are receivers as women. You know,
It really is. Yeah. I think one of the biggest wounds is around that word right there. It really
yeah.
is. We are unbelievably up on time.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, it feels as though in some ways, I think kind of ending here because, I know in the work that I do with women, we could sit with this idea of what does it mean to be fully receptive? That
Mhm.
that could be a lifetime contemplation. So in some ways, I kind of love that we've like ended on that cliffhanger.
We learn to be receptive by shifting our energy to the back of the body and
Mm,
creating space for things to come in.
beautiful. So where can listeners find out more about you and your book, of course, and your work?
So you can go to my website, which is www.creativelycoco.com, and there's a book thing on there. There's also things about the book launch and about me as a person. Or you can follow me on Instagram at creativelycoco, or on Facebook. Although I prefer you to follow me on Instagram.
Wonderful. Oh, this has been a total joy. Thank you so much, Coco. And I hope your book does wonderfully.
Thank you so much. It's
Mm.
been an absolute pleasure.
I very much hope you enjoyed watching that. And if you did and you're not already subscribed, then do hit that bell thingy and subscribe to automatically get each fresh new episode as it's released each week. If you'd like to find out more about the work we do at Be Mythical to guide and support old souls in this new world to live their own unique myth, do hop along to bemythical.com and you'll find out all the ways you can join us and go deeper with us on your own mythical journey. Lots of love for now. Mwah. See you again next week.